Be switched off this evening at 6 o'clock, so not too long, but there will be cold water available in jugs outside in the breakout area, so you shouldn't go thirsty. There will also be plenty of hot water for teas and coffees during the course of the evening. If the fire alarm should sound, and we have no indication it would, please leave the meeting room by following the fire exit signs and meet on the Ipswich Town Football Club training pitch. Do not re-enter the building until you are told it is safe to do so. Please switch off all mobile phones or turn them to silent. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting, you are also consenting to being filmed by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph, or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. Okay. I will now move to the agenda. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. I have received apologies for absence from Councillor Muller, Councillor Gould, Councillor Eburn and Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you. Item 2, are there any declarations of interest by councillors? I see none, so we'll move on to item 3. Item 3, this is paper MC/21/29, is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of February 2022 and is for accuracy only. Are there any issues with accuracy? I guess not. Could I have a proposer for the minutes then, please? Councillor Haddingham? Councillor Matheson seconding? Yes, thank you. We're going to do this one by a show of hands. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, we will now move to item number 4. This is paper MC/21/30. That's the chairman's announcement. And as you will have seen in your papers, there weren't that many things that we attended to. But of particular note, I thought, was the event at It's a Rocket Science in Claydon, which was absolutely fabulous. And the guys there have done a really fantastic job of kitting out that building. And I think many of our youngsters are going to be truly inspired as we move forward in the space age. So thank you for that. We're going to move now to item number 5. This is the leader's announcement. I would like to invite Councillor Morley to present her update. Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Chair. Normally I would spend time as part of my announcements talking about our various achievements and activities over the last month. As you know, we are unfortunately seeing further bird flu outbreaks in our district. We are supporting residents to reduce the energy bills, which is so crucial given the rising cost of living. We have published our first climate change and biodiversity annual report. We have used external funding to plant more trees. We have secured new external funding to provide specialised emergency accommodation for rough sleepers and those at risk of homelessness. And last week we underwent our corporate peer challenge. The peer review team had 48 meetings and spoke to over 200 people over the 3 days they were here. And we are looking forward to receiving the report and recommendations from them before we next meet. But I want to focus my attention this month not on what is happening in mid-Suffolk, but instead on the atrocities happening in Ukraine, what actions we are taking as a result, and the motion before us tonight. It was on the same day of our meeting last month that Russia began its invasion of the Ukraine. We all publicly expressed our support for the people of Ukraine at that meeting. Since then, unfortunately, the situation in the Ukraine has clearly worsened, and the people of Ukraine have been dragged into all-out war. We hope that peace can be reached as soon as possible and that the Ukraine can regain its independence and freedom. But Mid-Suffolk cannot and will not sit quietly by. We will be vocal in our continued condemnation of President Putin, and we will support our friends from the Ukraine. It is heartwarming to see how many people in this country have already signed up to help house and shelter those escaping the war. We do not have the figures yet, but I am sure that many of the residents of Mid-Suffolk have already offered to generously fling open their doors and spare rooms to support the refugees. Much of the details of this scheme, and more generally, is still to emerge from the government. We will, though, be working as the Suffolk family across Mid-Suffolk, the County Council, other local authorities and wider public sector to make sure we wrap support around our residents and our Ukrainian friends. I hope you will all join me later when we debate the motion, which is item 15B on the agenda, to send a clear and unanimous message to President Putin and to the people of Ukraine. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Morley, noting, are there any clarifications required? Councillor Morley? Okay, in which case we're going to move now to item number 6 on the agenda. This is to receive the notification of petitions in accordance with Council Procedure Rules.
Thank you, Chair. We have received the following validated petition, 102 valid signatures regarding planning application DC 21-06825, land to the south of Suggan Hall Farm, Church Lane, Rickinghall. This petition will be dealt with through the normal planning processes. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move to item 7 on the agenda. This is questions by the public in accordance with Council Procedure Rules.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Then we'll move to item number 8. This is questions by councillors in accordance with Council Procedure Rules. I refer you to the question in the table papers, and I would like to invite Councillor Otten to ask a question.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm scanning through this, trying to find, I can remember the words exactly. Obviously, we're pleased about the small grant the government is making to people of £150 towards their energy bills, but those will be paid only to people that pay their council tax by direct debit. I'd like to know what the council will be doing to help those people that do not pay by direct debit so they can receive that very small sum towards their high energy bills. Thank you.
Of Councillor Whitehead, I'm going to ask Councillor Morley to respond.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Otten. I must advise you that the basic premise behind your question is incorrect. The government will be providing the council with £5,199,300 in funding to support the payment of £150 to households in council tax band A to D that meet the qualifying criteria. This includes not only households who pay their council tax by direct debit, but also those households who do not. Where the council holds bank details on its council tax records, we can easily and automatically pay qualifying households the £150. Paying the £150 to qualifying households who do not pay by direct debit is not as straightforward, and a process to do this is being developed. The current estimate is that this is in the region of 8,500 households. Once this process is finalised, a letter will be issued to those households outlining the process that they will need to follow to obtain the grant. We have always encouraged all households to pay by direct debit, and any household setting up a new direct debit before the 1st of April can and will be included within the automatic process and therefore be in earlier receipt of this grant. Alongside the main scheme, the government will also be providing the council with £161,250 discretionary funding. And the council will be developing a discretionary policy for the administration of this limited funding to support vulnerable households who fall outside of the main scheme. Thank you.
Councillor, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
No, thank you, Chairman, but I'm pleased to hear that the council will be able to support those people that are not paying by direct debit, and I would hope that the council maybe could extend a incentive scheme to encourage people to do just that in the future. Thank you.
We'll now move to a question from Councillor Scarf. Councillor Scarf, would you like to ask your question, please?
Firstly, Chairman, thank you for allowing this as an urgent question at your discretion. I do appreciate the opportunity to ask this question, so thank you for allowing us to do that. My question is, what steps, if any, are Mid-Suffolk District Council taking on behalf of residents to express their disappointment of the news that HSBC Bank are closing their Stowmarket branch, affecting users of the bank locally and wider than just Stowmarket?
Minister, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you for that question, Councillor Scarf. The Council will be writing, and I've seen the letter actually, so very shortly, to HSBC to advise of its disappointment about the closure of this High Street bank and to urge the bank to reconsider this closure. As Stowmarket is the economic centre for many rural areas, it is important that we work with the banking sector to ensure provision is made for local customers in the future.
Can I thank the portfolio holder for his answer? My supplementary question would be, why this time are we writing to the bank when last time, NatWest, we didn't?
Councillor Brewster.
Thank you. I must admit, I don't know the answer to that one, but this is a very challenging situation. And having in the fairly recent past lost the NatWest Bank and Santander, more recently Barclays Bank, for so-called commercial reasons, which were exacerbated by online banking. We've now been notified by HSBC that they will be closing their operation in Stowmarket along with a number of other towns. This will leave just TSB in Stowmarket. I'm assuming that the excuse for HSBC's closure will be the same as those banks already closed. And unfortunately, this does nothing to support those wishing to use the bank in person, those who don't wish to use online banking for various reasons, and those who are elderly or disabled, and for whatever reason, also including those businesses in town. So the question is, what are the next steps we are taking? At this time, I am able to confirm again that the letter is being sent to this bank, and I've asked for it to be done in the strongest terms, following which, if the bank take no notice of that letter, that and given the pressure and accessibility problems of the post office in Stowmarket, I've asked that we should research another way in Stowmarket of serving banking for the public, and that is being continued right now. But I'm sorry, I don't know why NatWest wasn't written to.
Brewster. Right, we are now going to move to item number 9. So this is paper MC/21/31, New Code of Conduct for Councillors. I would like to invite the monitoring officer to introduce this paper and its recommendations.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to introduce this report, which asks the Council to adopt the new Model Code of Conduct as its own local code of conduct. The Model Code was developed by the Local Government Association following the recommendations made by the Committee on Standards in Public Life. The new Code of Conduct is accompanied by a set of guidance which gives greater clarity to councillors and complainants about the scope of the code and also the definition of behaviours which would be in breach of the code. If the council agrees to adopt this new code, it will come into effect from the annual council meetings in May 2022, and there will be training for councillors on the new code before it comes into effect, the format of which is currently being discussed by the Suffolk Monitoring Officers Group. Currently, the same Suffolk Local Code of Conduct has been adopted by all tiers of local authorities across Suffolk, which has significant benefits for those of you that are twin or triple hatters even, representing different councils at different levels. We intend to maintain this approach and will be recommending the adoption of this new code to town and parish councils in the area with the support of the Suffolk Association of Local Councils. I'm very happy to answer any questions, Chairman, and would ask for a proposer and seconder for the recommendation. Thank you.
Could I have a proposal? Councillor Morley?
Thank you, Chair. I would be delighted to propose this report.
Okay, could I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Mellon?
Yeah, very happy to second, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the monitoring officer on this paper? No. In that case, do we wish to... Councillor Matheson?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just looking back to the last time we brought in new code of conduct, etc. I remember there was considerable difficulty with the number of parishes that decided they didn't like it and didn't want to adopt it, and so I'm hoping that we'll be very articulate in our persuasions that it is in their interests.
Okie dokie. Right, in that case, we'd like to kick off the debate if we're going to have one. Who would like to kick off? I think Councillor Matheson by default sort of did that. Yeah, you're very welcome. Well, if we're not going to have a debate, I mean, you know, the Code of Conduct is one that we've obviously looked at several times in the past, and I'm sure that every councillor in the chamber would want to behave in the most appropriate and proper manner in their role. And so I'm going to ask the Officer for Governance to conduct a vote, please. This will be through modern.gov, as usual.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now showing in blue if councillors can cast their vote. Thank you. Can I take your vote then, Councillor? In favour, thank you. That's 20. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. That vote is 29 for and 1 against.
Okay. And that is carried. We'll now move to item 10, which is paper MC/21/32. Community Governance Review. I refer you to the Appendix A that's in the tabled papers. I would like to invite Councillor Morley to introduce this paper and move the recommendations therein. Councillor Morley?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to introduce this report on commencing a community governance review in Mid-Suffolk and the associated terms of reference. The Council is required under the Local Government and Public Involvement in Health Act 2007 to periodically carry out a review of the boundaries and governance arrangements for the parish and town councils and unparished within the district. The review will start on the 1st of April and will be completed by December this year, with any new arrangements coming into force before the elections in May 2023. If a review is to be carried out, it will be delegated to the Community Governance Review Working Group, consisting of Councillors Susie Morley, Sarah Mansell, Penny Otten and John Whitehead, and report its recommendations to the Council. The Electoral Services team will be supporting the Community Governance Review Working Group. And I would call for a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Matheson. Thank you. Right, we will now move to questions. Councillor Otten, what's up?
Well, not actually a question, Chairman. Just to say thank you to the officers for amending the paperwork. The chairman of Suffolk Local SALC must have seen this far in advance of myself and noticed that the timeline was completely incorrect. And obviously there was somebody had cut and paste. So could I ask whether SALC will be part of the consultation if this goes through, please?
I don't know.
We've got Edward McCready, who's the Electoral Services Manager.
Oh, right. Mr. McCready, would you
Chair,
help us
I'd
here?
like to report that we'll be talking to all stakeholders and writing to all stakeholders once this is approved, including SALC, MPs, yourselves in your various hats, and anybody else that has an interest that we can identify.
Thank you very much. You're very welcome, Councillor Otten. Councillor Mansell.
Thank you, Chair. I understand that this has been some time coming because I know some parishes have been asking about certain changes to their governance arrangements or whatever it's called. So I understand that this community governance review will be clearly looking at those parishes that have made requests for us to look at it. And I couldn't, when I read the papers, I sort of assumed that it was, I wanted to ask if we will be looking at other things as well as the parishes that have requested us to look at it. That was certainly the impression I got from the paperwork. So can I just have that clarified?
Chair, the intention is that this is going to encompass all parishes and unparished areas. We'll be writing to every parish council via the clerk and at all unparished areas and parish meetings. It's going to be all-encompassing.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions? If not, then we shall move to debate, and councillors will be allowed to speak for 3 minutes during the debate, which will be timed. Who would like to kick off? No? Councillor Scarf.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as a member of another parish council, very pleased that we're actually finally conducting this community governance review. Our own parish, Stone Market, was one to ask for this some years ago, so it's been delayed for a little while. So very pleased and welcome the community governance review, and let's see what comes out of it.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay. Councillor Morley, as we don't seem to be getting into a big debate here, can I ask if you wish to add anything, Councillor Morley? No, super. In which case, I'm going to ask the Corporate Manager for Governance and the Civic Office to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now showing in blue if councillors can cast their vote. Thank you. Chair, that is 30 votes for. That is unanimous.
Carried. We'll move on to item number 11. This is paper MC/21/33, designation of the section 151 officer role. I would like to invite the Chief Executive to introduce this paper.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, Councillors. As Councillors will be aware, the statutory officer positions within the Council fall within your gift for appointment, so that's the Head of Paid Service, the Monitoring Officer and the Section 151 Officer. As you'll see from the report, and as you're aware already, our existing Section 151 Officer is sadly retiring at the end of April, and you've passed on your thanks, I think, in numerous meetings to her, and I'm grateful for you for doing so, and by all means do so again if you wish, as she's here tonight. It's always good to embarrass her. But as a result of her retirement, as you would expect, we've been out to recruitment to replace both for her substantive role as Assistant Director for Corporate Resources and therefore equally to deal with the issue of the appointment of a Section 151 Officer. So in terms of the recruitment of the Assistant Director, again, you'll see within the report, we've been through a lengthy exercise utilising external support through Penna Executive Recruitment. They put candidates, having gone through a recruitment exercise, put candidates through a number of hoops, from recording videos of themselves to a technical interview, to an interview with a stakeholder group of external officers and support from other organisations, through an interview with yourselves or some of yourselves in terms of a stakeholder panel made up of councillors, and then a final interview as well as being grilled by the senior leadership team as well. You'll see, and you will have seen through working together, I'm sure, a few weeks ago, that as a result of that, Melissa Evans, who you will all be familiar with, has been appointed to the role of Assistant Director for Corporate Resources. And so this report this evening is simply asking you to equally appoint her as your Section 151 Officer.
Councillor Morley, and now could I have a seconder? Councillor Flatman? Okay. So, before I move on to the next bit, I think I want to lead the chorus of people who would love to embarrass you, Catherine Steele, because in my time on the council, I can honestly say that you've always been extremely clear and forthright in giving us good advice, and it's the sort of advice that's allowed this council to have a really strong financial position and give us the strength to do the things that we're looking to do over the next few years. So I thank you on behalf of the council, on behalf of myself, and I wish you well in your retirement. And I'm sure that in Melissa Evans, we have a fantastic and very capable replacement. So thank you both. Right, does anyone have any questions at all or anything to say on this? Right, in which case I'm going to ask the Corporate Manager for Governance and... Oh, Councillor Morley, I beg your pardon. I'm too excited.
I don't have a question, but following in your footsteps, Chair, I was part of the interview panel for Melissa Evans, and we did have two strong candidates come forward for interview. But Melissa's energy and enthusiasm and passion for Mid-Suffolk really shone through. And so I really want to congratulate you, Melissa. You did a really good interview, and I'm really looking forward to working with you, even more than we have before. So thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Morley. Now I will definitely ask the Corporate Manager, Governance and Civic Office to conduct the electronic vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. That is now showing in blue. Councillors, for you to cast your vote. Thank you. Chair, that is 30 votes for, unanimous.
Right, we're going to move to item 12, and before we engage with this particular item, I'd like to ask members of the senior leadership team to please remove themselves from the chamber while we discuss it, and then we can proceed. Of course, that's with the exception of the Chief Executive Officer, who's actually going to present the report, and the current Section 151 officer. I would also like to draw Councillors' attention to the fact that we have with us this evening Steve Davies, who's the Employer Services Specialist from London Councils, and I would like to welcome him to the meeting. Mr. Davies, you make yourself known. Thank you very much. Okay, so now I will now ask the Chief Executive to introduce paper MC/21/34 and its recommendations. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening again, Councillors. So this report comes before you tonight, having previously come forward in a different incarnation back last September. You may recall at the time that report was withdrawn from you, so you didn't get the opportunity to debate it at the time, and the reason being that on that occasion, Babergh's full council meeting happened before your full council meeting, and it was rejected at the Babergh full council meeting, and therefore logically withdrawn at that stage. I should say at this point, not least because the Chairman mentioned the fact that I'm still in the room, one of the changes since last time round is you may remember that the report contained details in relation to my pay and proposals in relation to my pay. At my request, the leader has withdrawn that, removed those elements, which is what means I can comfortably stand here before you tonight and both present the report and answer any questions if you have any for us. Similarly, on last occasion, Catherine Steele would have had to have withdrawn, but given that imminently, as we've said already, she will be retiring, so she's comfortable to stay with us. We also have Suzanne Hughes, who's our head of HR and OD, if there are any specific HR or OD questions alongside Steve Davies. So the report before you tonight deals with the pay policy statement, but more particularly is designed to make some changes in relation to the pay arrangements for the senior officers. You'll appreciate and you will all be aware that following the withdrawal of the report last time round, there have been lots of meetings since in your group meetings and similarly with Babergh colleagues in the same vein. What that yielded was at least 23 different concerns, points, issues that I know councillors wanted us to address in making changes to the report as it was drafted back in September. And actually that 23 got expanded because once you were having discussions, it went beyond 23. I think at last count it was something like 26 or 27. All of those points have been addressed, picked up and incorporated both within the covering report that you have before you tonight, but also within a part of the ILGA report. And just to explain Steve's presence, unfortunately, Michelle Kirk, who wrote the actual report on behalf of the East of England LGA, suffered a bereavement, and so she can't be with us tonight. So Steve's very kindly stepped in, as you heard, from the London employers' side, but he's very familiar with this type of work. So the recommendations that you've got before you, I think it'd be useful for me just to briefly outline them. I know councillors have seen them before, but just for completeness if I outline them for you this evening, and then I'm more than happy to take any questions once the report has been proposed and seconded. So in terms of the recommendations, 3.1 and 3.2 are the key elements in relation to salary. They are the ones that make the changes to the directors' levels of salaries, and you'll recall from the report, director level salaries, their base salaries haven't been reviewed for over 11 years, and they're now being looked at in terms of this report. Recommendation 3.3 then asks me to look again at the question of job titles. So I've broadly just referred to them as directors, just to get me out of the hole of being specific in terms of this report, but I'm more than happy to go away and look at job titles again to bring them in line with modern terminology and what other councils are using. Recommendation 3.4, assuming that recommendations 3.1 and 3.2 are approved, would create the headroom financially for me to be able to then do the complete review of all staff in relation to pay. That's the reason why it's coming forward in this order. That I don't need your permission for. That's within my gift, but I do need the headroom in order to be able to progress with that, the financial headroom to be able to progress with that. And I know councillors were keen to see that formally confirmed within the report that I would do that, and that I would do that within a certain timescale, and so that's encompassed within 3.4. 3.5 is to pick up the point that under the current arrangements, and this is true of all officers, not just senior officers, The increments, so the 5 increments that you'll see under recommendations 3.1 and 3.2, and similarly for all other staff, they are achieved essentially on an annual basis by virtue of having been at the authority for another year, as long as performance is not poor. In effect, you can hear from my words that it's not therefore performance-related pay, i.e. you don't have to be performing well to receive your increment, you just have to not be performing poorly. I think there's a problem with that, and I know councillors have expressed that concern as well, whilst not wishing to implement a full performance-related pay type arrangement like you might see in the private sector, but a greater alignment between pay and performance. And so that's what that recommendation is saying that I would go away and do. 3.6 is then simply adopting, I say simply, but adopting the pay policy statement. You're obliged by law to adopt a pay policy statement every year, and so that's the formal act in this report of doing so. And then 3.7 is, notwithstanding the fact that you look at the pay policy statement on an annual basis, is recognising that time has gone away from us, and that's part of the reason why we've found ourselves with the need to address this in such a significant way, because as I said at the start, pay at this level hasn't been reviewed for over 10 years. And so 3.7, that recommendation, is ensuring that we don't get back into that problem again by making sure that there is a detailed review in relation to pay at least every 4 years. The idea being that you don't therefore find a position where you get too far behind the market as we find it today. So hopefully that's all self-explanatory. I know councillors have had discussions around this in group meetings beforehand, so I'm more than familiar with it and probably didn't need me to do that explanation, but I think it's important for the public to hear that as well. If there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Otherwise, I will sit down and hopefully somebody will propose and second the motions.
Thank you, Arthur. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Morley? Thank you. And Councillor Mellon to second? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so we'll now move to questions. Councillors will be allowed up to 3 questions. Doesn't mean you should ask 3 questions, but you're allowed up to 3 questions, and they must be relevant to the matter under discussion. And please, questions should be questions. Who would like to ask their first question? Councillor Matheson, remember you're asking a question.
Yes. Yes, recommendation 3.3. I was quite puzzled by this actually, because it doesn't actually seem that long ago that we were told that it would be beneficial to recruitment, etc., to call the heads of service assistant directors instead. So I was rather wondering what more modern titles had overtaken that.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that it didn't seem that long ago, but it was certainly before my time, so it was well over 5 years ago. So I'm not entirely sure when it was, but nonetheless, you're absolutely right. That's one of the challenges, that there aren't that many job titles to play around with in that respect. And equally, I will express a personal view that I really don't care what officers are called, and that's not the important thing. But what is important is that their job titles properly reflect what they do and aren't, dare I say it, local government mumbo-jumbo in terms of making it difficult for the public and difficult for councillors and, dare I say it, difficult for fellow officers to absolutely understand, well, what exactly is that job? The key thing more often than not is to make sure that the job title gets that relevant officer the foot in the door of other organisations. And sad to say that it is the fact still that unless you've got the right job title, sometimes that's harder to do. And I suspect that may well be, Councillor Matheson, why the argument was for moving from heads of service to assistant directors some time ago now. So I don't have a preconceived view as to what the new job titles should be. It is something that I looked at loosely about 12 months ago and left it alone. But as I said, it was something the councillors have raised, and as a result, I'm more than happy to look at it again.
Are there any other questions? Okay, if there are no further questions, then we shall move to debate, and councillors will be allowed to speak for 3 minutes, and this will be timed. So who would like to kick off the debate? Councillor Mellon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Clearly this is a tricky issue, and there's some history behind it. But I'm glad we've got to this point now where I think we can, there's likely to be a majority to accept this recommendation today. Myself, I don't feel qualified to assess what level of pay senior officers should be receiving. And that's why we go out to consultants and people who know better and who can look across a range of councils and get an idea of whether we're behind or ahead, And it seems, you know, from that information we've been given, that we are a little bit behind the going rate. And that explains why we have struggled to recruit to some of these roles. So I think it's an uncomfortable situation, but we have to be realistic and we have to accept the situation we're in. We've fallen behind. For me, the comfort of knowing that there's going to be a review of all the staff in the organisation over the next year and having a sort of fixed date for that does give me some level of comfort about this decision. I don't want the senior staff to be, you know, moving ahead and everyone else to be left behind. So I'm happy to second this, and I'll be voting for it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Richardson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a few brief comments from me, if I may. I'll be supporting this wholeheartedly. I think this is, as many have mentioned already, long overdue. I think in particular it goes some way to address some of the key organisational challenges that we have. The first, as Councillor Mellon quite rightly said, is the question of recruitment and retention. And I think that's a really important point to reflect on, because if we you know, as an organisation, we do have significant aspirations, and it's incumbent on us as a council to ensure we have the resource and the right level of expertise to deliver that ambition. And I think it's absolutely right that we then address this, given the enormous amount of time it's been since these salaries were last reviewed. And I think, as the report makes clear, it's important that we are moving in line with other comparative local government councils to ensure that we are competitive. And I think it's also worth reflecting on the alternative is to rely on interim appointments if we can't recruit, which will just ultimately end up becoming more expensive for us as an organisation. And then again, completely as Councillor Mellon said, I think the other aspect of this is then unlocking that future review of the pay of all of our staff. Because ultimately and again, that's not just from a recruitment and retention perspective, but also let's think about this from a well-being perspective. You know, we talk about the well-being of our residents, I certainly do, but actually we also have a duty of care and responsibility to our own staff. We've talked at this meeting and the last about the inflationary pressures that our residents are facing. That same applies to officers. And I think if we're going to progress this, then that enables us to look at the pay of staff across our organisation, which I think is fundamentally the right thing to do in general, but particularly at the present. So I think this is a really important report, and I thank those involved, and will certainly be supporting it and voting in favour. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Richardson. Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Chair. Just in case you're any doubt, given that I proposed it, I am voting for this. When I first joined the council in 2015, a goodly number of our senior leadership team were interims. And it's a bit of an anachronism in our system that interims can be appointed willy-nilly at vast cost without the approval of council, whereas to employ somebody on a full-time basis or even on a part-time basis at this level does require council to get involved in the setting of the pay scales. So for me, this is a bit of an anachronism that needs to be got rid of. When Arthur joined Mid-Suffolk and Babergh, the first thing we said to him was that he had to get rid of all the interims. And he's done this. And it's been hard work to restructure. We've had restructures. We need to pay our staff something that is commensurate with what they can get in our other local organisations around Suffolk. And at the moment, a corporate manager can leave here and go and work as a director for another council and be earning more than our directors do. And that is simply not fair. We take great pains to grow our own officers. Melissa is a fine example of that. And we need to be able to pay them a commensurate salary in order to keep them for as long as we can. We invest a lot of time in their training as well as their well-being, and I want to keep our staff. Our staff are fantastic, and we need to keep them, and we need to pay them properly in order to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. Councillor Field.
Thank you. Always a difficult subject to discuss. I guess my feeling is that a situation where one has a large number of interim staff is somewhat ridiculous. It's extremely expensive and it's disruptive to other people as well. It implies that you don't value the permanent people, you value the interims. But there's always a difficulty with vacancies. Well, why can't we recruit to a position? And there's always two possibilities. That the people you're trying to attract don't fancy the environment, it doesn't have ambition, or they don't like the people they'd be working with, or the reputation of the people they're working with is poor, or the salary is too low to attract movement. I find it difficult to believe that either of the first two things I mentioned are true in this environment. The council does have ambition, and I'm sure that the surrounding staff will be more than acceptable to any recruit. So it has to be that it's a salary issue, and there was some evidence generated to support that, as Councillor Morley's just mentioned. So I find that given that we are intending to review the salaries of other staff members as well, further down in the hierarchy, I'm fairly comfortable that this is the right thing to do, and the salary levels proposed are appropriate. Perhaps with just one other caveat, the one the Chief Exec made about progression from stage to stage not being merely because you've managed to drive here for another year, but that you actually have contributed to the development of the organisation at the level appropriate to this sort of staff. So I feel that it must be fairly obvious that I will be voting to support this. Thank you.
Councillor Wellham.
Doesn't appear to be working. Shall I shout?
No, you're talking to the wrong machine.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm not going to say very much anyway. But hopefully it will be worthwhile me saying it. Yeah, it is very important to be able to recruit quality staff at levels below corporate manager, those who aspire to move up the hierarchy. So I'm pleased that there will be an across-the-board review and expect it to be completed by the 31st of March 2023, as it states in the recommendation. And I hope it will be implemented from the 1st of April 2023, and not delayed. So I will be supporting the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Wellham. Councillor Passmore.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just a couple of comments. I agree with what has been said, but I'd also, I shall be supporting this, just for people to reflect. If you go back a long, long time ago, 15, 20 years, that some of us can remember, where, of course, you had Babergh and Mid-Suffolk as two discrete organisations. It was rationalised, and I forget some of the top salaries there, but that was effectively not quite halved, but certainly recognised that. So there's been a big productivity growth, which we need to recognise. And, of course, recently, now we are trying to operate as two sovereign councils, but all under one roof, so to speak, without getting into a tangled-up debate on that. Also bear in mind the different constraints and requirements on local authorities and the population growth that we have both down in Babergh and Mid-Suffolk. So, yes, we do need to look at taxpayers' value for money, but we do need the right staff and the incentivisation of them to make sure they have real focus on delivery to the benefit of our local council taxpayers. And I'm sure Arthur has got that completely under both wings and will no doubt be working very hard, continue to working hard, to make sure that's delivered. So I shall certainly support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Passmore. Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be fairly brief. Just want to make the point that all of local government is struggling to recruit at the moment, even those that are paying the most. So I will be supporting the recommendation, and I'm really glad that it's going to start a review of all staff, that was I have to say a sticking point for me, and now we've got that into the recommendation. I'm very grateful, thank you. But just don't be aware this isn't a magic bullet. just by giving a commensurate salary with others will not save and our recruiting problems all at once. What will help is the culture of the authority and the schemes that we bring about and the good works that we do. That will help encourage new people in. And equally, while we're talking about retaining our existing staff, please don't forget that we have lost staff here that have gone to other councils for a pay cut. So this isn't a magic bullet, but I will be supporting the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Stringer? Okay. Well, I guess that, you know, the comments that have been made across the chamber can reflect the feeling that we as a council want to make sure that we have the best possible team batting on our behalf and on behalf of our citizens and making sure that, you know, we deliver on the important priorities that we've set this council, and we do that with expertise, skill, and no less compassion. I think one of the things I would like to also see is that there's a very clear understanding for staff below the director level as to what the opportunities are for them to progress within the organisation, because I think that says a lot about the strength of our organisation if people can see that there are routes of progression through the ranks. So I do welcome the pay policy. I do think that we're off in the right direction, and I thank councillors for their contributions this evening. And before we move to the vote, I guess I would like to ask the Chief Executive if he'd like to say anything else. That's the right answer, Arthur. Thank you very much. Okay, I will now ask the Corporate Manager, Governance and Civic Office to conduct the electronic vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now showing in blue for councillors to cast their vote. Thank you, Chair. That is 30 in favour, so that is unanimous again.
Councillors. Okay. Right. Well, she's in the council appointments? No, sorry. Item 13, yes. And Mr. Davis, thank you for being here, even if we didn't call upon you, but we appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Thank you.
For the other officers to return, so we can move to item number 13. officers for returning. We're moving now to item 13, MC 21/35, decisions taken by the Chief Executive under delegated powers in accordance with Part 2 of the Constitution. I would like to invite the monitoring officer to introduce this paper, please. And it's just for noting.
Thank you, Chairman. The Council is asked to note the schedule of decisions taken by the Chief Executive under delegated authority. The first two decisions relate to urgent decisions that were required to respond to the increase in the Omicron variant of the COVID virus earlier this year. And the final two relate to the making of neighbourhood plans in Needham Market and Thorndon following a successful referendum result. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So that was for noting. We'll now move to item number 14, Councillor appointments.
Chair, I haven't received any, but I don't know if there's any on the evening.
Councillor Morley? No? Councillor Mellon? Okay, super.
None for me, thank you.
So before, I'm going to call a break at this juncture because it's got really warm in here. So if we could take 10 minutes out and cool down, hopefully the temperature will have dropped a little bit by the time we come back, and then we can proceed with item 15. Thank you. Right, I hope you were able to get a little bit of respite. Doesn't seem like the room's any cooler, but let's press on. So we're now at item 15, motions on notice. And the first motion, A, is to consider the motion on notice received from Councillor Morley. So, Councillor Morley? Oops. Councillor Morley will join us in a minute. If you'd like to move your motion.
Thank you, Chair. This motion, the Council supports the petition launched by ADSO and LLG on the 5th of January with regard to remote and hybrid meetings. We agree to write to the Secretary of State for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities, calling on the government to change the law to allow councils the flexibility to hold such meetings when they deem appropriate within agreed rules and procedures. I've attached the model motion and I would call for a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. Can I have a second, please? Councillor Miller?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Very grateful to Councillor Morley for proposing this motion and also for asking me to second it, which I'm happy to do. Is it okay if I speak now? Is that right? Yes. Members will remember, I'm sure, the start of the COVID pandemic almost 2 years ago and the shock of that first lockdown and the Prime Minister announcing on television that we all had to stay at home in the house. And once it became clear that this is going to be for a considerable time, we all had to work out how we could connect online, how we could somehow continue the work of the council and our role in it as councillors. And I want to pay tribute to Councillor Carter here because he was a bit ahead of the game, because probably 6 months before that he'd said to us as a group, oh, we really should be meeting remotely. We should be using Zoom, we should be using Teams and some other thing. I've never heard of these things before, but he was ahead of the curve. And then, of course, we all had to learn how to use them. We had to learn how to use Zoom, and, you know, I'd only done a couple of Skype calls before that, but, you know, we've learned how to use these tools, and we've managed to, for a little while, when the law allowed, we were able to do the work of the council online. So we had, you know, development control meetings, we had full council meetings on Teams. For sure, it wasn't perfect. You know, I think the phrase of 2020 was, you're still on mute. And we've all made that mistake. But I think it was better than not meeting, and still we were able to continue the work of the council. And it's a shame that the government hasn't stepped up and made that change permanent, so that we have that option of having a hybrid meeting or having a remote meeting when circumstances allow. So just a couple of points just to finish off. The government called for evidence on this issue last March. I know there's been a change in the Secretary of State in that department since then, but we do need them to get on with it. And I think this motion, you know, does give them a little bit of a push from us and for lots of other councils too. There are benefits from going online or from having hybrid meetings. There's savings in cost, there's less travel, and it's often easier for councils to access several meetings. I remember, you know, one evening when I went to 3 different parish councils, you know, sitting in my office, which much less easy to do in real life. There are problems as well. I mean, it's less easy to catch the kind of non-verbal cues, the body language, the tone. It's difficult to read the room when you're in a Teams meeting. Okay, last point. This motion isn't asking for an imposition of this. We have a choice, but we do need that change in the law. So I welcome this motion, and I encourage colleagues to support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mellon. We will now move to debate. Councillors will be allowed to speak for 3 minutes and just once, and this will be timed. So who would like to kick off the debate? Councillor Matheson, the floor is yours.
Right. I welcome this, certainly. I have to say, I signed a petition to this effect 12 months ago that the Society of Local Government Lawyers or somebody like that was actually promoting. And the reason we need it is reflected that when we started having virtual meetings, the attendance by parish councillors and objectors improved at the planning committee meetings, which was welcome. And then it dropped off again when the emergency legislation was not renewed. And that was very disappointing, as Councillor Mellon has said. So I hope that the government listens to the many councils and others that are asking for this option to be available, and then we'll see more parishes represented here at the planning committee again.
Thank you, Councillor Matheson. Would anyone else like? Councillor Field?
Yes, just a brief point or two to add. I guess as someone who used video conferencing in the late 1990s at BT quite heavily, I would logically support its introduction 20 years later to local government. I certainly think everything that's been said about the efficiency it gains in some circumstances is absolutely true. It's something that we should press government to get on with and authorise. I think there are some issues. The one I immediately thought of is the thought of people who can log on to a meeting, turn their picture and their sound off, and then go do something else until they know it's time to vote, and when they have not listened to the rest of the debate. And clearly in some meetings, like say planning meetings, it's usually considered essential that you listen to what's going on. So there are some issues that we need to address, but it'd be totally wrong to prevent us moving forward into this century, because there are difficulties. There are difficulties with everything we choose to do. So I certainly will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Field. Councillor Guthrie?
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to reiterate what's been said. I was the first person to hold the planning meeting, and I would like to thank everybody from the officers and the opposition. Although we don't use that in planning, we were all together and we had fabulous training between us all, and we all sort of really put our backs into it. And at the end of it, although my knees were knocking, we all patted ourselves on the back. It really was an excellent performance, and so I think it's very well worthwhile to consider, and I would be happy to do it again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Carter?
Thank you. I do recognise that there are benefits to meeting in person. Being able to read cues. There are some emotional benefits as well, being we are social animals. Looking at screens not always beneficial. However, I do believe given the option, the benefits far outweigh any negatives there may be. From an accessible point of view, we could have councillors people who would not stand for elections due to health, not being able to leave a room, not being able to attend meetings. So be able to open up an accessibility to those who may not have a voice currently, or may not feel they have a voice, far outweighs any negativity, in my opinion. There's also the benefits of cutting down fuel consumption, not having to travel. Officers who may have to travel to many different meetings in a day, so would be able to attend meetings without, well, from my armchair, as it were. And not only that, you'd have not only that, you'd have a pause button if you forget your loan of speech. No. But I'd say the positives far outweigh the negatives for this. And it's an option that we should certainly consider. Thank you.
Councillor Mansell?
Thank you, Chair. I'm bucking the trend here because I will not be supporting this motion. Don't get me wrong, I'm very much in favour of using the technology to support meetings, and we are not talking here about allowing officers to present remotely or parish councils to make representations remotely. That does not need a petition to the government. I believe that's already legally allowed, and we just need to get the technology and the licensing in place for it to be happening. We are talking here about members' meetings, and we're not all fortunate enough to have a private space at home where we can fully engage with online meetings. It's so much harder to concentrate on the matters of the meeting when you're surrounded by domestic chaos at home. Okay, maybe you're not all as chaotic as I do, but and I also share Councillor Field's comments about how will the actual members' attendance throughout the duration of the meeting be monitored if we were to have such meetings. Virtual platforms, I don't think, are suited to large meetings where we need to debate. They do not promote open and for fair debate and discussions. We all rely on those non-verbal clues and body language, which will not be available if we have online meetings. Okay, it was acceptable when we had no alternative, but now we are not so restricted. I do not want this to, I don't want to go back to it. I have my doubts about the statement about it being beneficial to our work-life balance. Some members who have commented that the councillors who are maybe absent today due to ill health would have been able to join in with this meeting tonight. But should we really be expecting our sick colleagues to have the possibility of being pressured into attend if they don't feel up to it? I also have yet to be supplied with sufficient data and evidence about the energy consumption and carbon footprint of the large data centres that are required to support virtual and video conferencing facilities. Until I receive such data, to make a really good comparison, I'm not convinced that it is less harmful to our environment than my current means of travelling to and from council meetings. In this letter that you're proposing that councils are allowed to have an option of holding hybrid or virtual meetings, but who exactly will be making the decision about the format of any particular meeting? Will it be a council decision, a cabinet decision, the leader on our own, the chief executive on his own? Will we, as the other 50% of the council, have any say in whether the meeting is a hybrid meeting, a virtual meeting, an in-person meeting? So I worry that it may end up being a political statement. Thank you.
Councillor Humphreys.
Mr. Chair, thank you. On Councillor Mansell's point, it's quite interesting about the carbon footprint, about the use of data and everything else. Yet everybody here has got a computer on, all connected to the internet. Guess what? It's exactly the same. There's no difference. Your point, actually, on the petrol and the environment is very valid, but also is the price of fuel. Imagine that. Not everybody's wealthy here. Everybody has to travel. And the cost of fuel to travelling to meetings now is extortionate. So let's think about that as well. And I know that members can claim, and perhaps the officers can and the staff, but there's a cost to it. There's an environmental cost as well. If we're living in a modern world, be modern. And if you're not modern, go back to the cave. Simple as that.
Councillor Passmore.
Thank you very much, Paul. I just want to reiterate the issue here. This motion is about flexibility. It's not about doing everything online and so on. So I think common sense should prevail here. And I think having the flexibility, I don't believe that any chairman or chief executive is going to impose it unless people are generally supportive. It does clearly save on the carbon footprint. I mean, for example, the journey for me to come down here, and it was particularly just for this meeting, that's what, 7 miles round trip. Lavinia right up almost in Norfolk, I don't know, that's probably 50 miles or more round trip. Then there's the time factor involved as well, where you can't be productive as you would perhaps like to be. So I think we should support this motion because it gives the option to be flexibility. There will be a balance. I don't have a problem, for example, if we have the budget debate to come in here and do it face-to-face. I get the issue there. Really, really important things there. Having that face-to-face meeting is actually a good thing to do. But have that flexibility, for heaven's sake. We need to develop and look at the costs, the debate, etc. So I should be supporting this. And please remember, as I say, it's the flexibility, not every single meeting being done remotely. And if it does allow other people who can't get here for some reason, I'm not saying impose it on sick colleagues, but those who might just be having to self-isolate and there's nothing else the matter with them, well, surely that's more democratic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Passmore. Councillor Scarf.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I will be supporting this motion. But just one point. We are sitting here with our laptops, but the main reason that we're sitting here with our laptops is that we need to access modern.gov.app. There is a system where we wouldn't have to do that if we use the county council system where it just comes up on your microphone for, against and abstain. So there are methods that could be used that actually reduce the carbon footprint that we're not able to utilise because we've made the decision to use modern.gov.app. Tonight, it's performing reasonably well. There have been a number of hitches with members getting access to the vote, but we have had so many problems with that over the course of the time. So just be aware, you know, that we could actually do even more to save.
Thank you, Councillor Scarf. Councillor Geek.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say I'm also worried about this motion because of the detail of the wording. As Councillor Mansell says, who is the they that makes the decision? In the past, the letter of council procedure, the letter rather than the spirit, has been used for political gain. Examples might include using the chair's casting vote over and over again when 50% of the council is opposition. But despite this very real worry that is based on current behaviour and practice, I feel that the flexibility and the inclusivity offered by hybrid or virtual meetings is essential. It's a pity that the motion has been worded in this ambiguous way, but despite my misgivings as to how that power might be misused, hope is triumphing over experience, so I am planning to vote for it.
Thank you, Councillor Geek. Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't planning to speak on this item, but I fear I might. As far as I'm aware, there's nobody in this room that lives in a cave. But occasionally, I did go to Zoom meetings and Teams meetings in what felt like a cupboard, and it almost felt like I was a year and a half in it. Having said that, it was essential at that time for us to do any business at all. So, and there were some benefits to it. I saw body parts of fellow councillors that I'd never seen before. And I was also able to be, I managed to get 2 parish councils aligned so that my council report came at the same minute at both councils. So I appear on 2 sets of minutes being in 2 different places at the same time, which is a first, which Teams allowed me to do. It also, if you were to look at one of the planning meetings, when I was speaking on the microphone, my son's dog chased in a feral peacock at one point, which you know, nobody wanted to hear the language that was around at that time. So there's benefits, there's also pitfalls. I would like confirmed by the monitoring officer, the chief executive though, whether we need to ask government whether we can have hybrid meetings, because I would like a little bit more explanation of that, because frankly for me, one big pluses could be that parish council representatives could come in virtually if they chose, but if they then chose to pay the car park or the train fee and sit around for hours and hours waiting to give their 3 minutes, that's completely up to them. But I think it might benefit the inclusivity of some of our parishes and those that wish to support or object to planning applications, for instance. It might be a very good thing. So if I have that little bit of I will be supporting it, but yet again, like the thing about staff financing, I don't think it's a magic bullet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stringer. Councillor Amoroso.
Thank you, Chair. So it's been raised the issue about the wording of the motion, and I wonder if you could all benefit from a bit more clarity around that. So one suggestion would be that we just make it a blanket statement that all meetings could be hybrid, and it's based on members' discretion or attendees' discretion. Or I'm open to, you know, would Councillor Geek, who raised the issue, have an appropriate amendment to make towards that end?
Amendments can be taken, so...
Right.
Cover? Oh, you could still make it, okay.
No?
Well, it depends whether the proposer of the motion would accept it or not, I guess. Have you finished?
I think so, yeah. I haven't got a great amendment to mind, but I just, if there's that question about clarity, if people agree, then yeah, probably should think about it.
Okay, I'll take some advice from the monitoring officer, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think it might be worth just clarifying that this motion is a intention. So it's writing to the Secretary of State to say that there should be legislative change to make amendments to allow hybrid meetings in their truest sense. And by that we mean allowing voting councillors to attend virtually as well as in person. What Councillor Stringer was alluding to was allowing and other councillors actually this evening were alluding to was allowing speakers and other participants to join the meeting in a virtual manner. And we are 90% of the way there in enabling that, and actually we're looking to have our first trial of that at the Cabinet meeting on the 4th of April. And that will mean that anybody who is not a voting member of the council or the committee meeting, or a governance officer or a legal officer can join remotely. So if we're talking about a planning context, parish councils, agents, applicants, any other public speakers could join remotely, and also officers who are presenting to the committee could join remotely. So I do appreciate your level of detail that you want to go into, because actually I want to go into that detail too, because I'll be the person who needs to write the procedure rules to support virtual and hybrid meetings. But at this stage, I think it's a principled decision, and if the government was minded to pass that legislation, at that point we could go into the detail of the mechanics of how it would work for this council. Thank you, Chair.
Indeed. So, Councillor Morley, do you have anything to add? Yes, please.
Thank you. Back on the 23rd of March 2020, who can forget that? We were in here, being sent into lockdown, and the following day we were all online, discussing, debating, talking to each other online through Teams. Our teams worked fantastically to achieve that. That was a real milestone. We were online as a council long before most other councils, long before. And this is not just about saying, this council, we're all going to meet remotely next month or whenever. This is about allowing us to have hybrid meetings when we so decide. Who here thinks that this council would not be a better place, would be a better place, if Councillor Eburn, Muller, Whitehead and Councillor Gould were amongst us? Okay, it's not about forcing people to attend remotely, especially if they're not well, but in pursuit of our own health and well-being, we are asking people to stay at home if they test positive, if they've got a slight sniffle, if they've got a sore throat, to protect the rest of us. And this allows us to do just that. So, for me, this is a no-brainer. We need to allow everybody in this council to be able to access and hold our meetings as and when we want, in the manner in which we want, without being dictated to by central government. So that's my case for this, and I look forward to all your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. I will now ask the Corporate Manager, Governance and Civic Office to conduct the electronic vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now showing in blue for councillors to cast their vote. Thank you. Chair, that is 27 for and 2 against.
Carried. Thank you very much. We will now move to item 15B, and this is to consider the motion on notice received from Councillor Morley. Councillor Morley, would you please move your motion?
I seem to be on my feet a lot more today than I am normally. So, Mid-Suffolk District Council, we're immensely troubled by the horrific devastation in Ukraine and the escalating humanitarian crisis facing the country. In light of this, and as a way of expressing support for members of our communities who are from or who have ties with Ukraine, this council condemns the unprovoked Russian invasion of Ukraine and stands in solidarity with the people of Ukraine and their families and friends, including those locally to Suffolk. We stand ready to provide support to those affected by this war and will open our arms to people displaced and affected. We will work with and support the efforts of our local communities to provide and help and comfort to those in need. Thank you, Chair, and I'll call for a seconder.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Flatman? Thank you. Do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak later? Okay, thank you very much. Right. Where are we? So we will now move to debate on this motion. Who would like to start? Councillor Passmore.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm fully supportive of this motion regarding the heartrending and I would personally find it I do find it traumatic, the pictures and what we have seen in the Ukraine. I never ever thought in my lifetime, after the devastation we all read about and heard about at school of World War II, that we turn full circle and once again you're getting back to a dictator, a despot, mad, butcher of Moscow, whatever we like to call him, it's despicable. I also want to say at this stage, I am certainly not labelling every person of Russian descent in that same category. We need to be very clear about that. I do not believe that is the vast majority of thought in Moscow. The trouble is, of course, as we all know, they've been conditioned to thinking they don't have the benefit of free press, free debate like we can have here and throughout the United Kingdom, much of the Western world. I think there are things that we can and should be doing. Certainly from a policing perspective, I said straight away for our procurement chain, make sure everything is taken out of there that's got anything to do with the Russian economy at all, as far as you possibly can. We are all well aware, of course, that it's causing huge problems for farming, like the reserves of potash, natural gas, of course, clearly for ammonium nitrate. But we've learned lessons over here, I think. Food security, we've been too complacent. Defence, clearly very complacent. Some of us said that for years. It's not good enough. And energy security. Governments have a moral obligation to actually plan ahead and balance up the risk and everything else that we see. Personally, I've been in touch with the Suffolk Refugee Society. We'll certainly do what we can to welcome those poor people from the Ukraine, and I hope they can be here for as short a time as possible before they go back to their homeland. It is such a disgrace. And I think the other thing we've got to do is make sure we try and arrange, I suppose, a boycott in procurement, our goods and services that we purchase, of those firms that have still not pulled out of Russia. There are some motor manufacturers, I believe, and I do stand to be corrected, the VW group was not pulled out, but Jaguar, Land Rover, BMW, Volvo, Ford and others have pulled out, Nissan and whatever the organisation is called. Clearly BP and Shell have been good examples of pulling out, as is Exxon. I'm not so sure about French Total Finer Elf or whatever it's called. And I was also very disappointed at the UN that countries like Bangladesh, India and others actually abstained, and of course China, who I do regard as being duplicitous in this. That's a personal view. And the last point I'd like to make, Mr. Chairman, and we've done this again in policing, looking at our treasury management, please can we make sure we don't have funds put anywhere near organisations like Deutsche Bank, who have also refused to pull out of Russia. We've got to do everything we can to support these poor people in the Ukraine, and we must not allow this barbaric dictator to have his way, because once he's got that, where will he be next? Good luck to the Ukrainian people, and we'll do everything we can to support it. So I'm right behind this motion. Thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Councillor Ottom.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I can't believe anybody would not vote for this motion. As Councillor Passmore said, we have seen some heartbreaking examples of children, old people coping with trying to disappear from what was happening. As far as what we as a council can do, I'd like to ask the question that, well, I hope the assumption will be that the council will not take back the 25% discount for somebody who is a single person if they are then taking somebody into their home to live there as a refugee.
I'd like to Arthur to respond to that.
Thank you, Chairman. We haven't formally made that decision yet, but I fully anticipate, based upon the mood of the room and from what I've heard from councillors over the recent weeks, that that's exactly what we would do. So anybody with a single person discount that takes somebody into their home, that they would retain that single person discount unaffected. Yeah, that's my assumption.
Ask then that we actually get formal notification that the council will do that in case we are asked by people in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alton. Councillor Mellon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm very grateful for Councillor Morley bringing this motion forward, and you know, watching the news is a tough thing at the moment, as we all know. It's just heartbreaking to see what's going on there. And I think we all understand the limits of what can be done militarily. You know, if NATO was ever to come into kind of direct conflict with Russia, it would be a nightmare, and we have to hold back from that. But I understand that, you know, our government is doing all it can in terms of supplying the Ukrainians with what they need to fight back. You know, this guy Putin we're now kind of seeing him for what he really is. He's kind of gaslit a whole country. He's brainwashed them. I really don't think the Russians really want to fight the Ukrainians, but they've been told a whole pack of lies, and it's based on that. But what I see in our communities is this kind of visceral reaction that we want to help, we want to do something. And you know, we've seen collection points where people have gathered together all sorts of stuff to send over there, and people going over to Eastern Europe in vans and lorries, and that may be helpful. I'm encouraging people to give money to the DEC appeal, perhaps more importantly. And lots of people are registering to host refugees. You know, we've done that. We're lucky enough to have a spare room that we hope we can get some people into. And I'm really glad that the government has put this scheme in place and that they haven't put a limit on it, so that we could get a really good number over here. I wish it was a little bit more generous in terms of a mechanism to bring these people over, so they don't have to, you know, find their own flight money or sponsor to pay it. If there's people that, you know, that need help and Poland seems to be full, let's get them over here. Let's get them into people's homes. We want to help. We want to support our communities in helping. And I'm grateful that this motion has come forward, and I'll be voting for it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mellon. Councillor Warboys.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm in favour. I'm glad to see that this motion has come forward. My only concern is that the language of the motion isn't strong enough. This is more than unprovoked. It is illegal. It is criminal. The behaviour of the Russian troops that's been documented so far in the Ukraine owes them liable to war crimes and persecution as war criminals. So I feel unprovoked doesn't quite say enough for me, and perhaps Councillor Morley would consider strengthening that language up. It has been described as genocidal. In The Guardian today, there was a case of a survivor from the Second World War, a 96-year-old man who survived Belsen, Buchenwald, Nazi work camps, and in fact 3 years in the Soviet army after being released. He was killed in a rocket attack today, a Russian rocket attack on civilian areas. It is appalling, and I think the language could be strengthened a little to recognise this. Thank you.
The War Boys. Does anyone else wish to speak? Okay. Well, I mean, I do concur with the general tenet of the discussion that has gone on this evening. I mean, this is a cowardly, curmudgeonly, horrible thing for Putin and his gang to visit upon the Ukrainians, and I'm sure that we all wish them the best, and we will do everything we can to support them. And I'm very pleased to say the government is really leading on that. So with that, I'll ask Councillor Morley if you would like to add anything further. Okay, in that case, we shall move to the electronic vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now showing in blue if councillors would like to place their votes. Thank you. Councillor Stringer, are you having problems? Thank you. Chair, that is 29 votes for. That is unanimous.
Thank you all very much. That is carried. So we'll now move to the third motion for this evening. That is item 15C, to consider the motion on notice received from Councillor Stringer. Councillor Stringer, would you like to move your motion?
Thank you, Chair. Delighted to move the motion that this council notes our continued support for neighbourhood plans as the expression of communities' intentions and aspirations for development. I'll stray away from the wording now, if I mean. I had the pleasure of being representing the first village that made a neighbourhood plan in Mid-Suffolk district, and that was off the back of hundreds of hours of voluntary work, not by me. I left the document well alone. I felt it was, in a way, the people's document. I get enough chance to interfere with development control, and I thought this was the opportunity for the good people of Mindlesham to come and have their say as to what they wanted. And they did. We had some fantastic consultations. Lots of people putting sticky dots on maps where they did want it, where they didn't want it, and the reasons why. Even quite a few surprises for us that had to try and enact this plan, which is great. Which means it's also very important to the community as a document. And government, often we accuse them of not listening, but government have listened, but in this instance, because it's part of the legislative framework of our development plan. A made neighbourhood plan, in the eyes of the government at the moment, is that if that's bolted onto the national planning policy framework, that is a made development plan for any given area. Quite right too, because it's been worked with the people, on behalf of the people, and it aligns with government policy, as it should also align with our made policies here at the district. So I think what we have struggled with over the years has been how frustrating changes in legislation have slowed up some of the plans. And also it's been difficult to get enough resource in for everyone's needs. We have basically a resource of one officer here. At the moment it's now been brought up to 2, which is great. But that's an awful lot of workload at times. Bearing in mind we also would like as many parishes as possible to have made neighbourhood plans. We've now got the original patch of plans, now coming up to 5 years, some of them, that will also need reviewing. So the workload of that in the upcoming years is probably going to be greater.
So, quite pleased to move the motion, and I hope we can be as unanimous about this motion as we was the previous one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Mellon?
Thank you, Chair. This motion focuses particularly on the needs of the core villages in our emerging joint local plan. I'm sure you know all of them, 14 core villages. I won't ask you to name them right now. But those have become kind of key places in terms of the development of the district, because those are the places where lots of our planning applications are going to. And what's become clear over the last little while is that these neighbourhood plans, where they're made, are very, very important legally, particularly as the full adoption of the joint local plan has sort of receded a little bit further into the distance, and particularly the part 2 of that plan. Now, we know lots of work has gone into these neighbourhood plans in the villages that have done them, and they've become more important legally. And I think it's just really important at this moment to kind of restate, to reiterate the fact that this council supports neighbourhood plans. I've talked to 1 or 2 clerks who have become a little bit cynical about them, to be fair. And we're talking about not just people in small villages, but some of our larger villages. You've got clerks who say, well, the process is just so long that we don't, see the end of it. And I spoke to another clerk who said that he felt the only purpose of a neighbourhood plan was to get that extra 10% of SIL. And we know there's a bigger purpose there. It really does guide the development. But we need to be certain that all that work that's gone into a neighbourhood plan is something that we respect as a council, that we don't seek to undermine it, that we don't seek to overturn it, we don't seek to allow applications which go against what a neighbourhood plan has intended. So I think it's really important that we restate that right now, and particularly focus on these core villages. Ones which perhaps didn't want to do a neighbourhood plan a few years ago, perhaps the parish council, the makeup of it has changed, a new clerk, a new chairman, and these people could be talked to and perhaps persuaded that it's a good idea to do it now. So I think that's what we're aiming for, and I hope that everyone will support this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Merlin. We are going to now move to debate. Councillors will have 3 minutes and will be able to speak once, and this will be timed. So, Councillor Byrne, I see you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. It's going to eat into my 3 minutes, unfortunately, but I didn't recognise quite a lot of what Councillor Moen was saying as forming part of this motion. Supporting neighbourhood plans after they've been made is not a part of it that I can see, and overturning planning recommendations on the strength of neighbourhood plans not being. No, sorry, I got that mixed up the wrong way around. But I think you know what I mean. I don't recognise a lot of what you were saying, I'm afraid, Councillor Mellon. Because, first of all, let me declare that I strongly support, I'm a big supporter of the neighbourhood planning concept. To give an element of control to communities over development in their areas as introduced as part of the Localism Act 2011 was a very good thing. It also gave them an opportunity to protect components of their environment that they most value. Now then, that was 11 years ago, so how much of a good thing has it been? There are some 120 parishes in mid-Suffolk, and to date we have only 15 adopted neighbourhood plans and another 13 at various stages of preparation. Now together that's about 23% of our parishes. Now, given that it takes a long time to create a neighbourhood plan, and there's no getting away from that fact, it is a lengthy process, and the statutory requirements mean that it has to be so, it takes at least 2 years for a relatively straightforward one, would we regard that figure as an acceptable take-up over the past decade? Do the parishes need more encouragement and support to embark on the neighbourhood plan journey? The members who brought this motion to council obviously think so, but we do need to look closely at what added value it will bring to the table. Let me first make a distinction between those two words, encouragement and support. Do our parishes need encouragement? Oh, most certainly they do, as Councillor Mellon pointed out. But that's something all of us as ward members should have been giving them ever since the Localism Act was introduced, and it is our responsibility to sell the idea to our parish councils. Do they need support? Most certainly. But for those parishes that have recognised the benefits and showed interest and effort, support has been made available to them in abundance, financial and otherwise, from various sources. We have certain statutory obligations to support the creation of a neighbourhood plan. We designate the area, we administer the consultation when the draft plan is submitted and collate the results. We organise the examination, we arrange with the parish council to carry out the examiner's recommendations, and we organise the referendum. We also have an obligation throughout the process to give advice on request. We mustn't forget that the underlying principle of a neighbourhood plan is that it is community-led. It is not intended to be local planning authority-led. Encouragement, yes, by all means, but more support than we already give, plus that already available from a multitude of sources? No, I don't think that's necessary. And so far as encouragement goes, on top of what we as ward members should be giving all the time, as a matter of course, we've only recently approved the funding to create a post that will do exactly that, reaching out to our communities, selling them the idea and pointing them in the right direction. We should certainly be showing them the benefits of drinking the water, but actually drinking it is largely up to them. Although I entirely support the sentiment behind the motion, I don't believe it will achieve more than is already available or soon will be. And so therefore, I don't think I can support it.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Mansell?
Thank you, Chair. As a member with two large core villages in my ward, one of whom has had their neighbourhood plan, which was after a lot of community work and engagement, went to Cabinet in October 2020. And it was said that they were going to have to deal with the modifications set out in the independent examiner's report. And that particular community asked Mid-Suffolk officers to help them with those modifications. That is nearly 18 months ago, and clearly we need more resources. There we have Councillor Byrne saying, oh, it takes about 2 years. Well, this one's been 18 months stuck at one stage, and it's stuck at one stage partly because Mid-Suffolk doesn't have sufficient resources to move it on. The other core village that is part of my ward is also desperate to have a neighbourhood plan and gets frustrated at every step of the way. So I am fully in support of this motion. We clearly need to have more resources going towards neighbourhood plans so that these core villages, these bigger communities, they are complicated. They are very difficult to deal with. And we clearly need to be allocating resources so that they can get their neighbourhood plan on the table and made so that it becomes part of our planning policy. I am fully in support of this motion. We need to help these villages. It's so complicated for lay people to get their heads around. We need to offer them more support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mansell. Councillor Guthrie?
Thank you very much indeed. I was very pleased to hear that Councillor Stringer had the first neighbourhood plan up, and I do believe you were the first to have to amend it for various reasons. Mid-Suffolk has been a strong supporter of the importance and value of neighbourhood plans since their original introduction as part of the Localism Act. That passion for neighbourhood plans is as strong today as it was then. As you will be aware, we receive funding from government to support neighbourhood planning and allocate those resources to our own accordingly, and to make sure we are all proactively supporting each community in the right way throughout the development, adoption and implementation of their neighbourhood plan. This is a tailored approach to suit the nature of the community bringing forward their plan, and we have a memorandum of understanding in place so that the communities know which elements the Mid-Suffolk District Council will deliver and which areas are the responsibility of the community. As we know, a huge amount of voluntary work and effort goes into these plans by our residents and communities. The adoption of the plan is not the end of the story, though, and we do have to interpret each neighbourhood plan for each relevant application against our own local planning, our own local policy position and the national planning policy framework. As we know, this isn't always clear-cut and will result in challenges such we're currently seeing at Thurston. It wouldn't be appropriate to expand further on that situation here tonight, but please be assured that Mid-Suffolk is totally committed to the neighbourhood planning, and therefore I see no need for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guthrie. Councillor Otten?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid I am going to mention the elephant in the room, and that is the judicial review on Thurston application and the comments by the judge on how this council took into account Thurston's neighbourhood plan. I, Councillor Richardson, former councillor here, Wendy Turner, have sat in Thurston Parish Council meetings where they have felt that their neighbourhood plan was not taken into account. What this motion is putting forward is for this council to reiterate its commitment to neighbourhood plans and to be able to say to those parishes now, we do take your neighbourhood plan seriously, we want to support you, and it will be part of the process. And I really think this would be a really good PR exercise to go out to the rest of those parishes who now may be feeling somewhat cynical about the council's attitude to neighbourhood plans. And I would urge councillors to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Amoroson?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to point out what might be an apparent contradiction made by Councillor Byrne earlier in his statement, which was that he acknowledged that there'd been a low take-up of local neighbourhood plans, but also that we needed to improve our encouragement of the take-up of neighbourhood plans, and therefore, if we're doing both, if we're doing that thing, then we expect that there's going to be more take-up, which would require more resources to deal with those. It appears we're already struggling with the current workload on those. So I'm confused by that paradox made by Councillor Byrne. Sorry. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Geek?
Thank you, Chair. In common with Councillor Mansell, I'm the other councillor for 2 core villages without adopted neighbourhood plans. Just to look at one of them, we've been expecting the Woolpit neighbourhood plan to appear any minute now for 6 months. We've continually been told that it's imminent. Since as far back as last summer, the Parish Council has offered to take it back in-house, to pay a consultant to get it done, to finish it off, but we keep being told there's no point. It's nearly there, just dotting the I's, crossing the T's. You'll have it in a couple of weeks, in a couple of weeks, in a couple of weeks. Now, the officer working on it is completely fantastic. I cannot fault the officer working on it. But clearly, the system is very, very under-resourced. I'm now beginning to hear conspiracy theories among my residents. It might not be in Mid-Suffolk District Council's interest to get that neighbourhood plan finished. I hear people saying that by the time we get to our 25% of SIL, the village will already have doubled in size. There won't be any building left to generate that SIL.
I try to put them straight, but sometimes it's very hard to disagree with them. So I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Field.
Thank you. I think I know of 4 core villages in the Ipswich Fringe. As a county councillor, I used to represent them all, but it's now, obviously, that's no longer true. But James Caston supports Bramford, Tim Passmore is Claydon and Barham, and I still look after Great Blakenham, all of which produced detailed village design statements and plans. The last time I heard their views, it was, well, we're not going to bother with a neighbourhood plan. It's a shed load of work and nobody will take any notice, so we don't do it. I'm sure we probably all agree that neighbourhood plans are pretty vital and we do need to get villages to do the work. It seems to me that this proposal, this motion, has within it some of the elements you clearly need. One of them is an authoritative voice to say a neighbourhood plan is part of the development plan. The work is worth doing. It will have an effect. People will take notice. And this sort of includes that. The final paragraph advocates, get it right, the allocation of resources appropriate to meet the objectives we have. That clearly is another issue, in my view, that these parishes have. They don't feel there's a readily available resource that they can lean on to help guide them to produce a competent plan. So I certainly will be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Humphreys.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I don't really understand the motion. I've read through it a few times and I'm like, okay, which bit are you trying to make? So, as a key part of development plan, neighbourhood plans help to guide. That's a statement. And then we go on to, in particular, working together with parish council community groups, is council actively promote and encourage the process of developing a neighbourhood plan. I've just been on our website. It does exactly that in many areas and gives them the help and guidance that they actually require. And actually, everybody in this room has a role to play in that. You're all ward members. Go out and promote it. So there's the first point. We don't need a policy. We don't need a statement for that. Go and do your job. If you think it's that important, go and promote it. And assist them and guide them and signpost them to the people that help. Because Councillor Byrne is absolutely right. This comes down to us, not the officers, us. That's where it starts. I don't need you to come along and we need to make a statement of this. You should be doing it anyway. I don't get it. I don't get the reason why you put this motion in. Honestly, I don't see it. The resources are there, the advice is there, the signpost is there, and you've all got a job, all of us. Go out and do your job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. I have to respond to that. Before I was a district councillor, I started the neighbourhood plan for Stow Upland. So I did my job even though I wasn't a district councillor, and I've still been doing my job in other parishes as well. As people were claiming firsts, I believe I was the first district councillor to have their made neighbourhood plan given little weight in a planning decision, allowing 60 homes on an area of land that was not allocated in the neighbourhood plan. So, Stow Upland and other parishes have lost faith in the council's ability to give proper consideration to neighbourhood plan policies when making decisions on planning applications. Stow Upland Parish Council, their plan was given little weight despite being the most recent planning guidance document and therefore the most relevant development plan document. As a result, they and other parishes have decided not to update their plans, or in many cases to produce an initial neighbourhood plan. It's therefore essential that there are resources made available to promote neighbourhood plans and encourage councils to start the process, and in the case of neighbourhood plans which are already or will soon be in need of updating, to provide the resources to review them. There's going to be a lot of work in updating, helping updating and reviewing, so we need the extra staff. I'll be voting for the motion, and I hope that there will be sufficient resources made available, not just for the core villages to produce their first plans, but also to review existing plans in need of updating. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wellham. Councillor Carter?
Thank you. I've previously been involved in councils who have honestly felt district council to be almost combative against them getting a plan. That's the feeling they felt. It seemed to be every time they tried to dot an I, cross a T, there was something else come back with. And the feeling was, oh, we're not going to do it because they want to put this planning event in. We want to protect this area, but they're going to put houses there. That's why they're holding it back. I've talked to other parish clerks, and the same thing goes. They say, oh, we've been through South meetings. It's all, they're not going to help. What's the point in going through it? It's wonderful on paper. It's going to cost us a lot of money, and it's not going to be listened to. They don't see any help. They don't see any commitment from us here. It's wonderful, yes, do our jobs, go out there, sell it. But what are we selling if we are selling something that they have no faith in? What have we said, what have we acted on to say that we are here to help you, we are going to stick by what we say, we are going to actually commit to what we are assisting you to do, and you are going to see a benefit. If it's only going to cost them in the long run, and if it's going to be thrown back in their faces, and they see no commitment from here, why is there going to be an uptake? So I fully support this motion. If we're actually saying, yes, we are helping you, yes, we are supporting you, and yes, we stick by our word. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fleming?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just thought I need to say something because I can't support this motion as it's currently worded, but I think everyone who knows me knows that I am an ardent supporter of effective neighbourhood planning. And I'd just like to say something about what that conundrum means. I don't believe that the problems with neighbourhood planning that have been alluded to here relate to lack of resources. I believe it's lack of material effect that neighbourhood plans can actually have. And that's what I'm hearing. I've have 4 neighbourhood plans going on in my division, and all the parishes concerned have received excellent support from Mid-Suffolk. So, and add to that, Mid-Suffolk is hiring or looking to hire additional planners. It's not easy to find planners. We're doing our best. They can't just be magicked up with the wave of a wand. I believe that we need to work harder on making sure that the neighbourhood plans fit with the joint local plan as it develops, and that planning committees and officers have the tools necessary to really take notice of and take into account neighbourhood concerns and neighbourhood plans. That's the part that needs work. It's not what is in the motion before us today. This motion does not address the problems in neighbourhood planning that have been raised this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Councillor Warboys?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there's no arguing with the fact, I think, that Mid-Suffolk District Council, taken nationally, is well ahead of the game with regards to neighbourhood plans. It's doing well nationally. But, 12% of our parishes with neighbourhood plans, that's not really a pass mark, is it? We have the structure in place to support our communities. This motion is just about revisiting that structure and reinvigorate it so we can get the enthusiasm amongst our parish councils for neighbourhood plans. I represent Gislingham Ward. None of my villages, parish councils have neighbourhood plans in place. They're small parish councils. For the last 2 years, I've consistently brought up the need for neighbourhood planning and how important it is in decision making and how significant it is. There is changes to the planning regulations coming down the road, the white papers I have seen about it. There is going to be an assumption that every significant parish has a neighbourhood plan in place. We can't underestimate the amount of work done by parishes in preparing the neighbourhood plans. This motion is an opportunity to just revisit the structure, reinvigorate it, and try to bring forward those parishes that are reluctant to get involved in it. Thank you. So I'm going to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Warboys. Councillor, you've already had your turn, I'm afraid. So, if no one else, Councillor Flatman?
I have one core village, Stradbroke. I have 4 small villages. I have one going to the vote on Saturday, and I have one tiny village, a hamlet, with probably 50 residents, and they don't even have a parish council. However, all my other villages either have a neighbourhood plan or, as I say, the last one is going for theirs on Saturday. One of those villages have 90 residents, 90. Do you know what this is all about? This is about leading the horse to the water. You cannot make them drink. If you've got villages that want to do a neighbourhood plan, they certainly will. And as Councillor Stringer said, the rooms are full of stickers, what they want. It's not all about planning, it's about green spaces, how many school places, what the villagers actually want. And I'm sorry, it's all about the community. If they want it, they'll get it. And if Stradbroke were here, Laxfield were here, and Wilby were here, they would say our officers were outstanding, all the way through. One little problem I had, Laxfield emailed me to say, what's happened? We haven't heard anything. So I give our officer a call, what's going on? We sent them an email 3 months ago. They just need to do one little thing. They hadn't looked at the email. Come on, it's up to the individual villagers.
Thank you, Councillor Flatman. I think that basically brings us to the end of the debate. Councillor Stringer, do you wish to add anything?
Oh, yes, I would.
I thought you might.
I have to say I'm actually quite shocked by some of the responses. The clue to the motion is in the first sentence, continued support. If we wanted to draft something that was overtly political and nasty, we could have done it, and we didn't. I think now is a perfect time for this authority to reassert that we support you. If you're going to put those hundreds of hours of voluntary work into producing or updating a neighbourhood plan, we will stand by you and make sure you get that resource. And frankly, it's a bit difficult taking lectures from district councillors that will never have a neighbourhood plan because they have something called a area action plan, which was 100% funded by this council and resourced by this council for staff hours. Some of us represent people that have put hundreds and hundreds of hours in because they believe that this council will listen to them. This motion is the perfect example and the perfect time to show that we will listen. And some of the tone I've really not liked. The Barber tone about Mendlesham decided to, they had to change their neighbourhood plan. No, they didn't. It was made in 2017. It will be ruled potentially out of date by the government in 5 years. So for them to do a review of it is actually quite timely and really good management. Thank you. We are getting resource from the District Council in doing this, but like everything else within planning policy, we are in a queue, and often the responses are nowhere near as timely as we would wish. Now, we're not going to apportion blame to that. All we want is that reassertion from you, Mid-Suffolk District Council, that if we put in those hours, which we have done, if we consult, which we have done, that you will stand by us and you will, quote, continue to stand by us. This is your opportunity to back that continued support. I frankly didn't think this would be a huge issue as a motion, but clearly it is. Clearly some members on that other side have severe doubts about neighbourhood plans, their validity, etc., etc. And somehow, that if you haven't got a neighbourhood plan in your area and you have a key service engineer, you're not doing your job as a district councillor. I completely refute that. Completely, 100%. Because it is up to those individuals, and sometimes it's an issue of credibility. So those existing plans, I can take you to a parish council that says it's absolutely not worth doing a neighbourhood plan. Look at what's happened elsewhere and how easily the made ones have been dismissed. So never ever allude to that. I will be proud to support this motion because I will, as an elected district councillor, continue to support my neighbourhood plans, and I will continue to support all of the neighbourhood plans of all the elected members of this council. I beg you to do the same. Thank you, Chair.
Concludes the debate, and I will now ask the Corporate Manager, Governance and Civic Office to conduct the electronic vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now showing in blue for councillors to cast their vote. Councillor Stringer, do you want to cast your vote?
I better vote for since I proposed it.
And Councillor Mellon? Okay. Chair, that is votes 15 for, 13 against and 1 abstention, so that is carried.
Then move to the last motion for consideration this evening. As you're well aware, Councillor Eburn is not with us this evening, so I'm going to ask Councillor Mellon to move this particular motion. Councillor Mellon.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Chair. I won't take too long with this. So we have a very simple motion here, and I'm very pleased to, on behalf of Councillor Eburn, propose this motion on adopting the Net Zero Carbon Toolkit, which has been adopted by which has been developed by 3 district councils, very similar to ours, with a grant from the Local Government Association's Housing Advisors Programme. Now, we hear a lot of talk about net zero carbon, and this council declared a climate emergency nearly 3 years ago. There was a member group looking at initiatives, and we have a plan in place as a result of that. We'll be very aware now of the rising prices of energy and the kind of crisis of living costs. But actually getting to net zero carbon in housing will mean we can be more in control of this, reducing energy costs in the home and being able to have a positive impact on fuel poverty. Here we have an initiative which embodies much of this and is very straightforward for us to support. What brought this home to me was a conversation with a developer after a planning meeting. He came to me after a planning meeting and said, "You guys keep talking about sustainable building techniques. What do you mean by that?" And I do see too many of our developments which are using the very, very traditional ways of building when they could be looking at much more modern and more sustainable things. So just from the toolkit itself, this thing, drawing together latest guidance and best practice, the Net Zero Carbon Toolkit is a practical, easy-to-follow guide to help plan a net zero housing project. And it's for builders, it's for architects, self-builders, and also for homeowners just wanting to retrofit or extend their property. And it gives them the kind of guidance and advice they would need. And implementing the measures laid out in this toolkit would help reduce the carbon footprint of new and existing buildings. The key point in this motion is this. Although this is a guide, and we're not making, in any sense, it to be mandatory, we want our office to be promoting this. They can promote it right through the planning process, at pre-application meetings, in discussions between builders and developers, right through the process, including the building regs team. This is the kind of key point that we want to make here. We can't make this mandatory. We know the law won't allow that at the moment. And there's a frustration, really, that the levels of building standards are not what they really need to be, and they're moving in the right direction. But this guide, if we promoted it, if we pushed it to people in the planning process, would be something that would help them. It would guide them. It would lead them in the right direction and could make some real impacts in reducing the amount of carbon emitted by our homes, the ones we've built already and the ones we're going to build in the future. So I commend this motion to the Council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mellon. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Field, do you wish to speak now? Wait. Okay. Right, we will now move to debate. Councillor Morley.
I'd like to make a point of information, if I may, Chair.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. This is actually very timely because we held our Suffolk Public Sector Leaders planning meeting on Friday, at which, as Chair of SPSL, I approved this document for use across the whole of Suffolk councils. So clearly you didn't know about that. And to be fair, most on this side didn't know either. But there was a bit of a discrepancy in the process that was followed, but the whole of the Suffolk Public Sector Leaders Group on Friday authorised me to sign off this document and distribute it. So with your permission, I'd like to read you the foreword that I've placed in that document. Suffolk's local authorities have a shared and collective ambition to work towards the aspiration of a carbon neutral Suffolk by 2030. And a key theme of our climate emergency plan is the delivery of sustainable homes, both new housing and through the retrofit of existing homes. Achieving such an aspiration is no small task, nor is it one that any single person or organisation can achieve alone. It requires everyone to come together, to work collectively, to share in their experiences and to build on their successes along the way. As local planning authorities, we are dedicated to supporting individuals, businesses and communities on this pathway to net zero. This is why we are publishing this Net Zero Carbon Toolkit, a practical and easy to navigate guide on how to plan your net zero housing project that should be considered in conjunction with your local authority's planning policies and building regulations. Whether you are a small or medium-sized house builder, an architect, a self-builder, or a consultant advising clients, this toolkit will help you explaining how net zero can be delivered through construction. This document has been adopted across the entire Suffolk system. I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. Councillor Amoroso.
Brilliant. So I just questioned one little word in that forward, which was great. You said should, and as we're all in agreement, should we make that should a must?
That is not what has been signed off by Suffolk Public Sector Leaders Group.
Councillor Fleming?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to speak a little bit about this motion. As the Cabinet Member for Environment and Building, I just would like to make a couple of points. I have, even though it's come at fairly short notice, I've read the Toolkit summary, not the entire document, and I can see that it contains some very excellent features and some new ideas that I really hope we can bring into the planning system. Some things which maybe we aren't doing now as much as we should be. And I particularly welcome the consistent approach to sustainable design across the county and hopefully across the country. I do note within the document, actually it's on page 2, with reference to how the LGA envisions individual local authority should use the toolkit. The LGA advisory states, please feel free to adopt this toolkit as you wish, to make it specific to your local authority, your geography or circumstances. And this is what I hope we will be able to do going forward. I believe that there's much work to be done to familiarise ourselves with its content, and I hope that meetings with the other environment portfolio holders in Suffolk and building regulations officers and other colleagues may bring out some of the things within this toolkit that are particularly important to Mid-Suffolk and emphasise those so that our planning guidance to developers isn't just, here's the toolkit, this is what we expect you to do. We've got some work to do to look at the content here and say this is particularly what we expect you to do in Mid-Suffolk. These are the parts of it that are really important. Because there may be areas that we wish to emphasise more and there may be areas that maybe we wish to play down. So on that note, I'm happy to support the motion, but I do think there's some more work to be done before we actually bring it to the attention of developers and implement it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. All I want to do is ask Councillor Fleming whether she said the word adopt or adapt at the beginning of... I think she said adopt.
No, I said adapt.
Did you? Good.
Okay. Would anyone else wish to speak on this motion? Okay, in which case let us... Oh, Councillor Field, I beg your pardon. You're right to speak, please.
Thank you. I hope you weren't trying to shortchange me until...
No.
But I will be brief, as I'm sure at this time of night everybody will be rather pleased about. I find this toolkit seems to me to be really useful. I know as a householder, and I'm sure as a small builder, it's rather difficult to decide exactly what you should be doing for a move towards zero carbon. There's a lot of work there. Clearly large developers may well have specialist departments that can do that sort of thing. We don't see a lot of evidence of that, I must say, at planning committees, but nevertheless they have the resource. But this provides a common basis, which is, as has been said, has been produced by a set of district councils using government funding, and is clearly competent and something we should adopt, in my view. The important bit, perhaps, is the last sentence of the last paragraph of the motion, which says, we will promote the zero carbon toolkit to applicants at all stages of the planning and building control application process. It does say we'll promote it, it doesn't say we'll issue some terrible punishment if they don't obey, but it is good guidance. It is something that must help us forward as a district council and Suffolk forward as public leaders are pushing. So I'm pleased to see we all seem to be singing from something close to the same hymn sheet, and I will just advocate that you support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Field. Councillor Mellon, do you have...
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to sum up briefly, I'm very grateful for Councillor Morley sharing her very erudite foreword to the guide, and she introduced it far better than I did. So I'm grateful that there appears to be a lot of support for this idea. I hope it will be really useful, and I encourage everyone to support it. Thank you, Chair.
We will now move to the electronic vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now showing in blue if councillors can cast their vote. Chair, that is 28 votes for. That is unanimous.
I'd just like to thank each and every one of you for what's been quite an interesting set of debates during the course of this evening. I think it's my conclusion that there's more that unites us than divides us, particularly when it comes to the concerns of our residents, whom we put, first and foremost. And I'm sure that, some of the concerns that have been raised will be addressed by officers as a matter of priority going forward. So I'd like to thank you and to remind you that the next meeting of this council will be on Thursday, the 26th of May at 5:30 p.m. and I look forward to seeing you all there. I wish you all a very good night.